Hello, grade 12 students. In this video, we're going to talk about the sexual cycle, the female sexual cycle. We're going to talk about the regulation of the female sexual cycle hormones. Document 1 about the sexual cycle. Menstrual cycle of the female is going to be divided into either ovarian cycle or uterine cycle. Ovarian, as its name indicates, for the ovaries, and uterine is for the uterus. So ovarian and the uterine cycle, they are divided into either pre-ovulation, as shown here, pre-ovulation or post-ovulation. Let's start with the ovarian cycle. Ovarian cycle is divided into either follicular phase, which is the phase before the ovary, is called the pre-ovulatory phase of the ovarian cycle, meaning that it's pre-ovulation before the ovulation. It's called the follicular phase, whereas the phase after the ovulation, it's called post-ovulation. It's called post-ovulatory phase. It's called luteal phase. So for the ovarian cycle, we have two phases. We're going to talk about them in details. Follicular phase, which is the phase before the ovulation, it's called pre-ovulatory phase. The phase just before the ovulation. And the phase after the ovulation is called a post-ovulatory phase, which is called the luteal phase. Moving forward, the uterine cycle, it's divided into either also pre-ovulation and post-ovulation. Pre-ovulation is divided into the period, it's the menses, where the bleeding occurs in the female, and it's divided also into proliferative phase. And the post-ovulatory phase is called secretory phase. So this is the division of the menstrual cycle. As I said, menstrual cycle is divided into two: ovarian cycle and the uterine cycle. Ovarian cycle is divided pre and post ovulatory phases. Pre is called the follicular phase, and the post is called the luteal phase. Whereas the uterine cycle is divided also as pre-ovulatory and post-ovulatory phases, where the pre-ovulatory is the period where the menses occurs, and the proliferative phase, and also we have the post-ovulatory phase, which is the secretory phase. Let's talk about this. As you know that the uterus is the site of the implantation of the embryo. The uterus is the site where the zygote is going to be implanted, the fertilized egg. This is produced in the ovary. Then the ovary and uterus, they have cycles. These cycles, they synchronize. They have to work periodically. They have to work with each other, and they have to work together. This is the uterus before and after the menses and during the menstrual cycle. What happens? What's the difference? What is the differences that occurs? What are the hormones? As you know, we have hormones, estrogen and progesterone. We're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about something called endometrium. We know, all of you, you know that the vagina is the female copulatory organ, okay? And the cervix, it's the first part, is the first part of the uterus. It's called anqur raham in Arabic. So we're going to talk about them in details. About 8 to 10 days before the ovulation, okay, the uterus will know that oocyte 2 will start to resume meiosis 2. This is related to the oogenesis. That's why I told you that we have to study the notes in order. So you have to study them and you have not to skip them. So uterus will know that oocyte 2 will start to resume meiosis 2, will continue meiosis 2, and it's going to be ready to be released out. So the uterus will anticipate the fertilization and the formation of the zygote. So it will prepare itself to this event for the zygote to appear and to come to the uterus. So the tube-like glands will start to appear in the endometrium. What is the endometrium? Endometrium is the innermost lining layer of the uterus. This is the endometrium. This is the innermost layer of the uterus called the endometrium. If you see here, it's thick and the premenstrual, while here it becomes thin and where menses occurs. So the role of these three black glands to sustain and nourish the embryo. So there, more blood vessels will start to form. So more number of blood vessels will hold more nutrients for the embryo. That's why these tube-like glands, if we have fertilization, will be formed, and more blood vessels will reach, and more nutrients will reach to the embryo for the nutrition. As I said, endometrium is the innermost layer of the uterus, innermost lining layer of the uterus. So this is the endometrium, it's the innermost layer lining of the uterus. This is the vagina, the female reproductive organ. Here is the cervix, the start of the uterus. Here we have the myometrium, and here we have the endometrium, which is the innermost one. Also here we have the fallopian tubes. So, due to the presence of more glands, tubuli glands, and to more blood vessels, the endometrium is going to be thicker, 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 more and more and more. So, these changes, they are referred to the proliferation stage, and it's under the effect of the hormone, which is called estrogen. Sometimes they call them estradiol. So, estradiol and estrogen, they are the same. Okay? So estrogen produced by what? By the follicles where inside the ovary. So these formation of more and more glands, formation of more and more blood vessels that will nourish the embryo with the nutrients needed to develop and to continue its life. These changes they are referred to as proliferation stage, and it's under the effect of estrogen. What is proliferation? Here we talk about this proliferation stage. Okay, so proliferation stage, this one, it's under the effect of which hormone? It's under the effect of estrogen. That we call it sometimes, in some books, they call it estradiol. It's the same. Proliferation stage will confound, will work with something called follicular stage, where in the ovarian cycle. So here we're working about proliferation stage with the follicular. So they synchronize, they work together. The ovarian cycle and the uterine cycle, they work together and they move together. Here we have the cycle. We have follicular phase and the luteal phase. Here, let's pay attention to the hormones. Which hormone is the mostly during the follicular phase? This is the follicular phase. I don't want to talk about LH and FSH. These are called the gonadotropin hormones. LH, luteinizing hormone, and FSH, the follicle stimulating hormone. Here I'm going to focus about estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen and progesterone. The red one is for the estrogen, and the green one is for progesterone. Let's pay attention here. Before the ovulation, pre-ovulatory phase, which is called follicular phase. Follicular phase of the ovarian cycle. Let's see which hormone will determine or which hormone is the dominant one. Let's leave LH and FSH. We're working only with the blue, with the red and with the green. So the red one is for the estrogen. This is the estrogen. And the green one is for the progesterone. Let's see here. The hormone that's mostly during the pre-ovulatory phase, during the follicular phase, it's the estrogen. Now this describes that the follicular phase is under the effect of estrogen, while progesterone is almost null. While during the luteal phase, estrogen and progesterone, they are approximately the same. What will happen during the luteal phase? We will discover in the coming slides. So, more blood vessels will appear until we reach the ovulation day. Around ovulation, during what? The post-ovulatory phase of the ovarian cycle, meaning that after the ovulation, the endometrium will acquire the maximum number of glands and vessels. As such, it will form, if you remember the last time we talked about the uterine lace, little الحزام around the uterus. So its vessels, its glands start to acquire and produce what's known by nutritive liquid, which is called glycogen. And it will appear as a uterine lace. يعملوا مثل cover or مثل حزام around the uterus to protect it. Where during the post-ovulatory phase, the endometrium will acquire maximum number of glands and maximum number of blood vessels, and its glands start to produce this liquid glycogen, and it appears like a uterine lace. For example, عاملين له حزام or عاملين له, for example, a cover for the uterus to protect it. This part of the uterine cycle we know is known as the secretory phase. This phase is under the effect of estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen and progesterone here, both of them, they are found in the luteal phase as well as in the phases of the uterine cycle, which called the secretory phase. So estrogen and progesterone, both of them, they are working. So both of them, they are working. How do we get estrogen and progesterone? Estrogen and progesterone during the post-ovulatory phase, they are produced by what? By the action of the yellow body that persists during pregnancy for about 3 months, if you remember. So this yellow body is called the corpus luteum. It's produced during the luteal stage of the ovarian cycle. So uterine cycle, secretory and the luteal, they work together. Secretory is for the uterine and the luteal stage is for the ovarian cycle. Here, let's pay attention. This is the most important figure in the whole lesson. Here, we're showing that follicles and the corpus luteum development, primary, primordial, secondary, tertiary, capillary, Graafian follicle. Here we have the corpus luteum development. Okay? Here we have hormone levels. These hormone levels are called gonadotropic hormones, LH and FSH. In this lesson, I don't want to focus more on LH and FSH. I will leave them to the next lesson. Ovarian hormones, estradiol, as I said, is estrogen and progesterone. And the last one is talking about thickening of the endometrium. The thickening of the endometrium. This one is during menstruation, it decreases in thickness. Then it increases during the proliferative phase of the uterine cycle, and then it increases during the secretory phase, and we will know why. First, ovarian cycle, as I said, pre-ovulation is called follicular, post-ovulation is called the luteal phase. And the uterine cycle, as I said, pre-ovulation is called menstruation, which is the period and the proliferative phase, and we have the secretory phase. These are synchronized. They work, they are periodic, they work with each other. During the follicular phase, the hormone that determines the follicular phase is the estradiol, it's the estrogen, while progesterone is approximately null. While during the luteal phase, estrogen and progesterone, they increase, they are not increased, progesterone increases, while estradiol, we have a high, but it's not as much as that in the follicular phase. So these estrogen and progesterone, they determine the luteal phase. These will help in the increasing and the thickness of the endometrium, as you see here during the secretory phase. So luteal and secretory, they are synchronized. Follicular and proliferative phase with menstruation, they are synchronized. So here we have the thickening of the endometrium is at its most where during the secretory phase, where it ends at day 28 approximately, and another menstrual cycle will appear where the thickening will drop and the blood vessels will, we have a sloughing of the endometrium. The endometrium will decrease in thickness. Okay, so if fertilization occurs, what will happen? If fertilization occurs, the fetus will be implanted in the uterus, where endometrium will form, finally, the placenta. While if there is no fertilization, between day 0 and day 6 of the menstrual cycle, the endometrium will be sloughed off, will be destroyed. So the spiral blood vessels will be exposed. So this will lead to the bleeding, and the thickness of the endometrium will decrease with time. So this is known as menstrual cycle or as the menses stage, okay, which is due to the drop of the levels of estrogen and progesterone when after the degeneration of the corpus luteum. So according to this figure, corpus luteum will degenerate. So the levels of estrogen and progesterone here will decrease. So the decrease in the estrogen and progesterone level will cause them to decrease in the thickening of the endometrium. And finally, we have the menstrual cycle or the menses. It's known in Arabic as الدورة الشهرية for the female. And then the cycle will continue and will go again and again and again. Okay? So this is known as the menstrual cycle. This is the endometrium will be sloughed off. The spiral blood vessels will be exposed. So we have the bleeding here. So bleeding occurs and it's known as menstruation or menstrual cycle. So this is the figure also showing what I have explained before. The ovarian cycle, we have follicular and the luteal phase. The uterine cycle, we have menstruation, proliferative phase before ovulation, day 14, where we have the rupture of the Graafian follicle, and secretory phase, where the thickness is its maximum during the secretory phase, thickening of the endometrium due to the effect of estrogen and progesterone secreted by the corpus luteum. When the corpus luteum degenerates, the level of estrogen and progesterone will decrease, and then the thickness of the endometrium will decrease, and the spiral blood vessels will be exposed. So we have sloughing of the endometrium. The endometrium will be sloughed off. So we have sloughing of the endometrium and decrease in the thickness of the endometrium, and we have menstruation, and the cycle repeats itself every month. Okay, so this is known as menstrual cycle, where menses occurs during the drop in the level of estrogen and progesterone after the degeneration of the corpus luteum, the yellow body, and the decrease in the thickness of the endometrium. Okay, thank you.